Wonderful. So my name is Margarete. It is a pleasure to be here this afternoon. I work for Dell Technologies, and I'm joined by my good friend Parul, who's also here from her own organisation, Udemon. We're going to have a bit of a fireside chat, and I'm going to give a bit of an introduction on Parul and how we know each other, and then we're going to kick into some questions, and hopefully we'll have a bit of a lively Q&A as well as we go through this. Thank you, Yanis, and thank you, Steve, for having us, and James, and the team from NTI. It's brilliant to be here. We're excited about this conversation, and I mean, what a phenomenal location, right? Like when we both heard that we were coming to the Monet experience, we just jumped at the opportunity. So, Yanis, that was a phenomenal conversation, and it was great to hear about the insights. I didn't actually know the capability that we had inside Dell was so strong from a services perspective. So wonderful to hear it. I think what we're going to try and do here in this session is really dive into some of the use cases and what we're seeing in the marketplace at the moment. Right, so to start with, Parul, you've led some phenomenal roles, right? You were the Chief Digital Strategy Officer at Liberty Mutual. You also held major executive roles both at AXA, Aviva. You've co-authored a book on AI, and now you're advising organisations, particularly financial services and insurance organisations right now, on their AI strategy, how they navigate it from a governance perspective, an ethics perspective, and a skills perspective. Can you share, building on what Yanis has just walked us through, some of the use cases that you're seeing right now from a FSI, financial insurance perspective, and where you're seeing some of those risks coming through as well?
So absolutely, thank you very much. And the reason that I'm the leading women in insurtech and fintech is because there aren't many. So if there's a group of 5, they'll have to choose one each year. So I was lucky one year. So that's the history of that bit. In terms of use cases, I've worked primarily in insurance and asset management. Now let me start with insurance. There's a joke which goes in insurance that an actuary and an underwriter and a salesperson were driving in a car. And this gives you the context of what insurance does. And the salesperson is on the accelerator trying for the car to go faster.
That would be you, Steve Young.
Yeah, exactly. And the underwriter is putting his foot on the brake saying, hey, there's risk, let's stop. And the actuary is looking through the back window telling both of them where they should go. So it's a very backward-looking industry. And the margins are extremely thin. So any kind of technological deployment is like a big question. Should we? Have you looked at our margin? We only delivered 5 or 6%. And investment management, it's the reverse. They have good margin. They've lived a cushy life. The fund managers are part data scientists. They're called quants. They've built their tiny industries of quantitative models within their processes, and now 60% of their cost is consumed by these human beings, very expensive, and their sprawl of technological applications, which are driving the cost. And with the technology becoming so important in investment management, there is a move to passive. Why do we need to pay human beings? Let's just track the index. Let's just invest in Vanguard. John Bogle talked about ETFs, which are tracking the market. You don't need the human beings. The algorithms will buy for your retirement. So that they're facing another existential threat, that the passives are eating into all those high-paying fund managers' salary, and their margins are shrinking. So the context when FSI is ever shrinking margin, a sprawl of applications, everything, they look at cost of everything. So in that context, where is the biggest opportunity? In both those cases, the biggest opportunity is in front office. Because if you look at the front office of each, the underwriting organization and the fund management organization, where they actually get the money in, they have the most expense there. And that is where the most of the value chain value lies as well. Yanis very eloquently talked to us about how AI strategies are built. What AI strategies need to be built around is where is the biggest pain point you have, which is the area where if you deploy a new business model, you will generate 10x what you were experiencing before, because that will give you competitive advantage. You choose incrementalism, you will not unlock sustainable competitive advantage, and there's always a pushback. The friction from people who are wedded to the model, who will absolutely draw holes in your theory, are many. So you've got to show them a very, very big leap. So that was a very, very long way of answering your question.
No, and I think it's fascinating to understand kind of where you're seeing some of the opportunities right now. So take some of the banks and where you're seeing that. Like, are you seeing organizations embracing this at an enterprise level, or is it more piecemeal? How are you seeing them take this forward in terms of the business case?
Piecemeal. Unfortunately, it's piecemeal, which led me to why I'm doing what I'm doing now, which is basically a CEO and a boardroom whisperer. I've been in C-suites with them. I know exactly the question board asks, shareholders ask them. And I've also seen the responses that CEOs have. I'm not going to name names. They put a lot of PR spin around very minute use cases. And that is such a shame, because your engineers, who are very talented people, are working on PR and marketing use cases, which already have less friction, will not unlock value, yet your really important engineering resource, who you're using as an IT ticket vending machine, is working on very, very peripheral use cases. So I do think that organizations need to embrace the fact that this is really, really paradigm shifting, and we need to think, how does my business model need to be in the age of generative AI, where the language barrier to adoption of AI has been unlocked, and therefore, what should I be doing such that I have a sustainable advantage over other business models?
And what do you see, Parul, are some of the challenges, like for some of those execs that you're talking to? Like, what's the biggest hurdle that they're overcoming? Is it change management? Is it enablement? Is it skills? Is it investment? Is it the legacy infrastructure? Like, what's really the constraints?
All of those.
Okay.
All of those. And the biggest one which we come across, I've sat in XComs, and the biggest one that comes across is we're sitting on a legacy spaghetti. We are, and large enterprises that I've had the good fortune of working with have been built through acquisitions, mergers and acquisitions. And believe me, the integration management of all these M&As, having led corporate development for many years, they don't do any IT integration, because IT migration is such a big headache. So they don't touch it. And therefore, we have this festering pile of IT legacy, data silos, one department's data not able to talk to another department. So a human being pulls out MI from each of this to produce exec MI. And sometimes there is a model they will build around a simple Power App, Power BI or something, that will produce the exec MI, which gets always interrogated. So I will have chief financial officer and chief actuary fighting with each other. I do not believe that data. That is completely wrong. You have misinterpreted. I was not that loss making. So all these questions are always emerge. And I think there is a massive friction, but also a recognition that there's an opportunity to move away from that.
Are you seeing any of the financial services and insurance companies getting it right? Like, are you seeing leaders coming forward taking a systematic approach to their AI strategy and rolling it out across the organization? Or are you still seeing almost shadow AI initiatives cropping up across the organization?
So I am seeing certain of organizations which are smaller in nature in Lloyd's market. They are newer and they have not had this legacy infrastructure that they have inherited. They are being very, very ambitious. They're saying that we're a data-first organization and living it rather than just saying it. So that's very important. And in larger organizations, there are CEOs who are very forward-looking, and you have to be able to not be risk averse. And once you have those qualities about, I'm going to take this risk because this is existential. And there they are increasingly using the hub and satellite model, where satellites are becoming data first, and the hub remains as such, and then we will re-platform. That's the general idea that they're working on. So yes, a lot to be hopeful for in financial services.
Good. No, I'm pleased to hear that. And in terms of the area, one of the strongest points, if anybody's not following Parul on LinkedIn, I'd encourage you to, because you put out some really great posts. And one of the things that interests me most about your posts is you touch on kind of ethics and fairness and trust quite a bit. Yeah. Can you talk to us a little bit more about that and how leaders are navigating that in their organisations right now to build in fairness and navigate the bias that's sometimes there in the data sets?
So the process is through validation, through actually white boxing many of the algorithms and talking to the people who are building these algorithms, exactly what are you doing, and validations of response is very, very important. Also, the second bit is building diverse teams. One of the things that Joy Bolamwami, I think I'm going to murder her name, and Timnit Gebru say is that you have teams which are very homogeneous and they can't even think of what it is to live a different life experience. So building diverse teams becomes very, very important. And so that, and then looking at the evolving regulatory frameworks that we have, EU AI Act, there is, New York State has produced its own ethics guidelines, and those become very important learning points. But I think very importantly, and I say this being married to an ethical philosopher, so he's a virtue ethicist, hence the name of my organization, which comes from Aristotelian ethics, is the fact that we need people who actually deeply think about what it is to be a good organization or a good corporate citizen, and what it means to have everyone in the world flourish, and what is my impact of my organization in that. So people who think deeply, creatively, and philosophically are also a good part of your team. These are not the people that you will bring in as consultants. You need to bring them in first off, from first principles, have the ethicist in the room, and give them the freedom to ask tough questions.
And are you seeing that happening, like that kind of multidisciplinary, diverse team? Are you seeing organisations really look at that organisational construct and, even at a small scale, is that kind of blended thinking coming through?
More so in fund management than insurance. Okay. And that's because the insurers tend to be very conservative. Yeah. They will wait and watch before they start adopting. So yes, that is something that's happening.
Yeah, good to hear. The area of, we've kind of touched on ethics, fairness, trust. I'd like to kind of just lean in on the area of cybersecurity. And I think, Yanis, you had put it out there as well at one point. And obviously MTI and Dell are here. In terms of cyber, we're seeing greater exposure now. How are you seeing organizations approach their cybersecurity landscape now with AI and really build a kind of stronger resilience with them?
So there are few things that financial services organizations which are familiar with insurance are doing. They are looking at risk mitigation, because you can either mitigate the risk within the organization or transfer it to insurers. Insurers tend to be very conservative around whether they will take the risk transfer of cyber risk, because the severity is very high. So there is a lot of work which is happening within the organization. I'm thinking of my CISO in my previous organizations. Yeah. They are concentrating on how do we keep up to speed in terms of emerging threats. Mm-hmm. And how do we track them through AI software? There's Threat Informer, which tracks threats. There is people like Darktrace, who come in and give you analytics around your own systems. So that's one area that there is a lot of a lot of activity in. There is a lot of reporting, and reporting goes straight up to the ExCom. There is one section in the board which is about emerging cyber threats. So that's a few of the things that they are working. There's, of course, you transfer the risk to a coalition or a CFC. These are two big underwriters in cybersecurity. And the point of vulnerability, endpoint, the number of cybersecurity trainings I've sat in, every few months I have to do a test. Do you know this is a phishing scam?
Yeah.
Do you know? So the endpoint cybersecurity training is also getting very rigorous within financial services.
And getting stronger and stronger. I know even in Dell, we do pretty rigorous training ourselves, right? So corporate governance, Parul, I know this isn't one we haven't talked about before, but I know coming from the insurance companies, they typically have very strong kind of governance, regulatory environments. Are you seeing that being disrupted, or are they looking at how they embrace kind of the large adoption of generative AI, and what will that do to the typical structures that they have in place today? Will it change it? Yeah, how is that going to
So when we talk about governance, there is, it's almost entirely taken or sucked up by ESG frameworks, the emerging ESG frameworks, where a lot of it is coming from the environmental regulation, sustainable finance disclosures, are you greenwashing, all of those things, and governance within the organization themselves. How is this decision making, clarity of decision making, are the decisions fair? Do you have equal representation, which comes into the S part of the organization? Do you have robust DEI strategies? So that comes into the entirety of how boards are looking at the organizations in terms of what is your governance, how is your regulatory compliance working, are you diverse, are you making world better by being there, or are you just contributing to toxicity? So all that is also within the purview of governance broadly, and ESG as a broad brush, broad umbrella area.
And it's encouraging, right, to hear about this ethical mindset coming through at a board level, that it's kind of one of the principles that's overriding and supporting how boards are moving forward. I think, and I'm conscious of time as well, but are you hopeful? I know you've got teenagers, and yes, are you hopeful about their future with generative AI? And what are you seeing are kind of the big leapfrogs now for broader society, whether it's retail, pharma, other industries outside of financial services?
So, I mean, am I hopeful? Of course, I am hopeful. One of the things that I say to my children when they are having a doom and gloom moment is that we are just masses of energy in a moment of time. You do not need to give yourself that much importance. I know you're my children, but we're not that important. And then I will read out some David Deutsch quantum physicist's lines to them, or some other lines from some other.
And she's not joking. I think she really is doing that at home.
And the upshot is my daughter's taken on reading Nietzsche and other such philosophers. Yeah. So yeah, we have to be hopeful, and you have to realize that it's not that big. The whole universe is much bigger, and progress or continuity or discovery, all that is to be discovered, is not yet discovered. All we can do is strive for more and more knowledge. So that's my thinking here.
And I think, Steve, you had touched on at the very start, right, which is this opportunity, like we're at this wave of huge disruption. I think the opportunities and the benefits of AI are all still to be unlocked, really. And it's just interesting to hear how different organizations, whether financial assurance, whether it's fintechs, how they're embracing this. From a return on investment, Parul, and a business case perspective, are businesses taking a novel approach to this? Are you seeing some elaborate approaches in terms of quantifying results at this stage, or are they still piloting it? And I think Yanis had a slide up around only 5% of organizations have it in production, which I was quite surprised about, because I thought actually it would be much greater. So just from a reward perspective and a quant perspective, you've seen the business cases with some of your clients right now. How extensive are they, and is there, are they forecasting quite significant change, or are they incrementally building it up year on year?
So here is what's happening is use cases which are getting funded, because every department will come up with a use case, and Yanis had shown really well all of the departments which have all these use cases, 200 or so use cases, the slide said. I might be misremembering. However, you have a budget. Each year you have a certain amount which is on what we call grow, and the rest is run in technology. In the grow budget, when you develop a business case, you look at 4 areas. You look at what is generating most value for the enterprise, which could be customer value, and it could be internal value from making people faster so they're able to write more business. So value is one metric, and value needs to be defined. Then you have to define viability of taking on that use case. Now, viability is clearly around, if I tackle this use case, will I make money, and when will I make money? This is all around your discounted cash flows. You actually do the numbers. And then there is the question of feasibility, which Yanis also talked about. And that's, can it be built, and can it be built in the reasonable spend? And finally, is it usable? Will it be adopted by the masses of user? Because the concept of you build and they will come is not true. It's a false pillar to rest your use case on. So all these 4 pillars that we look at, value, viability, feasibility, usability, all are looked at when we sit in the XCOM and say, okay, this use case is getting funded for the next 3 years, and that one is too low value or too complex, we're not going to fund that. So that's how we're looking at unlocking value through adoption of use cases.
And quite structured in its approach as well. And I guess quite fluid, right, in terms of speed. I know we're going to be out of time in a minute. One thing I just want to touch on is, and you've kind of touched on, alluded on already about diversity, but particularly diverse teams and some of our younger talent coming through. How are you seeing, are there any examples of some of your clients that are kind of nurturing the talent inside the organization, train them up on AI in specific ways to build those capabilities and skills in-house already? Because I think we touched on some of the big consultancy firms, and some of the partners that I work with closely are all, building out kind of large capabilities on AI. But really interested in hearing about the younger talent, and whether it's in schools or universities, but any examples of how we're nurturing that talent coming through to be geared up for a world of, and an era of generative AI.
So that is an area of development, because a lot of the work which is currently happening in insurance industry and fund management industry is around apprenticeship. But then they are being apprenticed into the old ways.
Yes.
There is a program of reverse mentoring where the Gen Z who are coming in are being told, how would you solve it?
Right.
But less so. And what we need to do more of is say that you do not dogmatically have to follow this L&D or learning and development path.
Yes. Yeah.
There is a new L&D path we should be working on, and that's something that we can work with Dell or with one of the MTIs, or all of the companies who have skills in understanding that piece of technology. And how do we make sure that people who have been from day zero exposed to technology are not taken to the green screen and Fortran area as soon as they enter occupation? So that's a big area that I don't know why we don't work with HR more, and why we keep them on the sidelines, but HR needs to be in the room, because there is a massive job displacement which will happen. And that means that we need to have the skill sets which are different to what we have today.
And I think that's really insightful, right? I think we've got quite a job ahead of us in terms of traditional L&D functions embracing AI and saying, okay, how is the world going to be different, and how do we make sure we build the capability and the skills for this different world. And I feel we're at a bit of an inflection point, right, in a transition from the old world to the new world of generative AI. I met with one of the banks recently, last week, and they had said that they had stopped all use of ChatGPT inside the organization. And then I met a trader on Monday at the same bank, and he said that they're still using ChatGPT in shadow functions right across the bank, and so technology is trying to catch up with it. But I just think, and they're taking in quite a large amount of graduates from March onwards. They're going to take them in and right through till September. And so they were saying actually the roles of some of the graduates they'd originally lined up have been changed, and they're looking at how do they use that talent now for higher value activity and start using some of the AI tools that they're going to deploy through the formal AI program they've got. Little do they know they're going to have to really search and check for those ChatGPT users across the organization. So I'm mindful of time. All right, thank you everybody. Thank you, Parul. Great to hear your insights.